Okay, so, a grown woman lets her little brother follow her everywhere, sleeps next to him, takes him on assassination missions, and the show just presents this like it's normal. It's not normal. Mei Mei is one of the most competent sorcerers alive. She charges per kill. She doesn't do anything that doesn't benefit her. That's literally her whole thing. She said it herself. So why does YY get a free pass? That's the part nobody wants to sit with, because the answer is kind of uncomfortable, and it's also kind of the most interesting thing about her character. We're gonna be here for 25 minutes. Buckle up. Let's start with Ui, because to understand Mei Mei's behavior, you first need to understand what she's responding to. Ui is Mei Mei's younger brother. He's a Jujutsu sorcerer, reasonably capable on his own terms, and on the surface, he functions like a normal member of the supporting cast. He's there in fights, he provides backup, he exists as part of Mei Mei's narrative. But none of that is what defines him. What defines Ui is his relationship with his sister, more specifically his obsession with her. And I want to be precise when I say obsession, because obsession is a strong word and I'm using it deliberately. This isn't a protective older sibling energy reversed. This isn't just brotherly affection. This isn't even extreme attachment in the way that some anime characters express. This is something different. Ui's entire world, as far as we can tell from everything the story shows us, revolves around Mei Mei. Not partially, not mostly, entirely. His choices trace back to her. His priorities are defined by her. His reason for doing anything at all seems to be connected to her in some way. If she needs something, he provides it. If she's in danger, he moves without hesitation. If she tells him to do something risky, he doesn't pause to calculate the cost to himself. He just does it. And that loyalty is not conditional. It doesn't come with limits. It doesn't have fine print. If Mei Mei told Ui to sacrifice himself for her, he would do it without blinking. And that's not speculation. That is the energy this character radiates every single time he appears. It's the energy that makes audiences uncomfortable, because it's not the kind of devotion that feels healthy or balanced. It feels like something has gone very wrong somewhere. People call him a siscon, and in anime fandom that term gets thrown around as a joke. But I want to pause on that label for a second, because I think using it as a joke actually prevents us from thinking clearly about what's happening. Siscon, in its most common anime usage, is a comedic exaggeration. A character who is slightly too protective of his sister, who gets embarrassed when she talks to other guys, who maybe blushes a little and acts awkward. It's played for laughs, it's never taken seriously, and the audience knows it's just a gag. Ui is not that. The devotion Ui feels is portrayed with a weight and sincerity that separates it from the comedic version of this trope. The story doesn't frame it as, haha, look at this goofy siscon. It presents it more like, this is just who he is. This is his fundamental truth, and that's what makes it feel so different, so much more unsettling, so much harder to just brush past. Because when you see that level of devotion, your instinct, the instinct of any reasonable person, is concern. Not admiration, not neutrality, concern. And most of the time in fiction, when a character exhibits that kind of unhealthy attachment, the story responds to it in a predictable way. There's a moment of realization, a push toward independence, a lesson about setting boundaries and developing your own identity outside of another person. That's the narrative pattern we expect. Mei Mei breaks that pattern completely. Section 2. What does Mei Mei actually do? Here's the thing about Mei Mei. She doesn't reject Ui's devotion. She doesn't set boundaries. She doesn't sit him down and say, hey, this is a little intense. Maybe you should develop interest outside of me. She doesn't create distance, she doesn't push back, and she absolutely does not try to fix anything about this dynamic. Instead, she accepts it, not reluctantly, not with discomfort. Not with that expression characters make when they're tolerating something they don't fully approve of but don't want to address. She accepts it completely, naturally, and with what I would describe as genuine ease. More than that, she leans into it. She teases Ui, she plays with his reactions. She interacts with him in a way that makes it clear she understands the full weight of what he feels, the full intensity of his devotion, and she has chosen not just to allow it, but to engage with it. Actively, deliberately, with a small smile on her face. And that's the thing that changes everything, because it moves this dynamic from unusual younger brother has unusual feelings to both of these people are actively participating in something that looks wrong. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is where analysis can go off the rails very quickly. The temptation is to immediately jump to the most extreme interpretation, to declare that something inappropriate is happening and use that conclusion as the entire point. But that's not what I'm going to do. And it's not what we should do, because the story itself is more careful and more interesting than that. Let's talk about what the story actually shows. It shows a dynamic that is intense. It shows Mei Mei operating with full awareness of Ui's feelings. It shows her teasing him in ways that exploit that awareness, pressing on points she knows will provoke a reaction, enjoying the reaction when it comes. It shows a relationship defined not by equality, but by Mei Mei's clear and unambiguous dominance. And then, in certain scenes, it shows things like the implication that sharing a bed between them is not only possible, but not a source of anxiety for Mei Mei. Details like that are placed deliberately by the writers. They exist to do one specific thing, to push you right to the edge of discomfort and make you question what you're looking at. And then the story steps back. It never goes all the way. It never confirms the worst interpretation. It just leaves you standing there at the edge, looking into the abyss, and says nothing. That's not accidental storytelling. That is very precise, very deliberate storytelling. And understanding why requires understanding who Mei Mei fundamentally is. Section 3. Who is Mei Mei, really? This is the core of everything. Mei Mei is not a normal person. I don't mean that in the obvious sense, that she's a jujutsu sorcerer in a world of curses. I mean it in the deeper, more fundamental sense of how she has constructed her relationship with the world. She does not follow social expectations. Not because she's rebellious, not because she's broken, not because she's trying to make a statement. She simply doesn't find them relevant to her. The things society says you should do, the way society says you should present yourself, the behaviors society has labeled as appropriate or inappropriate, she has evaluated all of that and chosen not to be governed by it. This is not the same as being selfish. This is not the same as being cruel. It's more precise than that. Mei Mei has her own internal system, her own set of values, her own rules, and she follows those rules with remarkable consistency. The most obvious example is money. Mei Mei is openly, unapologetically, almost philosophically motivated by money. She talks about it frankly. She chooses jobs based on what they pay. She doesn't pretend to be driven by duty or heroism or the love of protecting others. She wants to get paid, and she wants to get paid well, and she will tell you that directly. At first, that seems like it should make her unlikable, but watch how she operates within that value system. She doesn't steal. She doesn't manipulate people to extract money from them through dishonesty. She doesn't cut corners on her actual work. She is, by all observable standards, a genuinely competent, genuinely reliable professional who delivers what she promises and holds herself to a high standard of performance. In other words, she has an unusual value system, but she has discipline within it. She has ethics. They're just her ethics, not society's ethics. And the distinction matters enormously, because it means she's not someone who does whatever she wants without any framework of restraint. She has a framework. It's just built from the inside out rather than the outside in, and that changes how you have to read everything she does, including, and especially, how she relates to Ui. Section 4. The logic of Mei Mei's behavior. Now here is where we get to the heart of it. When you apply Mei Mei's internal logic, built on self-determination, on personal value systems, on doing what works for her within her own ethical framework, her behavior toward Yui stops looking chaotic and starts looking extremely coherent. Let's think about what Yui actually represents to her. In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, trust is rare, dangerous rare. Sorcerers and curses and betrayal and politics and power struggles. This is a world where the person next to you might be a liability, might have conflicting motivations, might prioritize their own survival over yours at a critical moment. The margin for error is small, and a single mistake in trusting the wrong person can be fatal. Ui provides something almost no one in that world can provide: unconditional, unshakable, total loyalty. Not loyalty that depends on whether Mei Mei is kind to him. Not loyalty that exists only when it's convenient. Not loyalty that might crack under pressure or shift when circumstances change. Total loyalty, the kind where if Mei Mei is in danger, Ui doesn't calculate whether helping her benefits him. He just helps her. The kind where if Mei Mei needs something done quietly and quickly without questions, Ui does it without questions. From a purely functional standpoint, and Mei Mei more than almost any character in this series thinks in functional standpoints, that is an extraordinary asset. But let's not reduce it entirely to function, because I don't think it's purely transactional, even for Mei Mei. There's a subtler element here, something that doesn't get talked about as much when people analyze this relationship. Being the center of someone's world is powerful, not in a dangerous, manipulative way, in a deeply human way. It is genuinely meaningful to be needed, to be admired with the kind of completeness and certainty that Ui brings. To have someone in your life whose loyalty you never have to question, whose feelings for you are completely unambiguous, who will not tire of you or grow distant or find someone else to orbit around. And for someone like Mei Mei, who defines herself so completely through self-reliance and independence, there's something almost ironically satisfying about having that kind of devotion directed at her. She doesn't need it, she doesn't depend on it, but it fits perfectly with her self-conception. She is someone worthy of that devotion. Of course she is, and Ui simply recognizes what others don't see as clearly. That's the internal narrative. That's how it feels, from inside Mei Mei's perspective. And the teasing, the playful, controlled, knowing teasing, is her way of engaging with that narrative, of holding it, turning it over, reminding herself and him of the dynamic between them. Not cruelly, not exploitatively in the worst sense, but deliberately because she is always, always in control. Section 5. The psychology of control. Let me take a step back and talk about control as a concept, because I think it's the most underanalyzed element of Mei Mei's character. When most people think about control in relationships, they think about it negatively. Control equals manipulation. Control equals something being taken from someone. Control equals a power imbalance that someone is abusing. But control as a personality trait, as a way of relating to the world, is more complex than that. Some people, not just fictional characters but real human beings, build their entire sense of safety around control. Not control over other people in the sense of domination, but control in the sense of knowing exactly what is happening, knowing exactly what to expect, having a clear and accurate map of the territory they're navigating. For these people, uncertainty is not just uncomfortable, it is fundamentally threatening. And how do you build certainty in a relationship? In any relationship, you do it by fully understanding the other person. By knowing them well enough that you can predict their behavior, anticipate their responses, and never be surprised in a way that destabilizes you. That's not cold or clinical, it's actually a form of deep attention. To know someone that well, you have to have watched them carefully. You have to have taken them seriously. Mei Mei knows Uai that well. She knows how he will react to everything. She knows which interactions will provoke which responses. She knows where his emotional edges are, and rather than finding that exhausting, she finds it comfortable, because it is predictable, it is safe. It is one domain in a very dangerous world where she has complete clarity, so when she teases him, she isn't doing it out of cruelty or carelessness. She is doing it from a place of complete mastery of the situation. She knows what will happen. She knows where the line is. She knows that she is in control, and that confidence, that bone-deep certainty, is what separates her from characters who might do similar things for worse reasons. She is not confused about what she's doing. She is not stumbling into inappropriate territory because she doesn't know better. She is standing at the edge of that territory, precisely, intentionally, with full awareness of where the edge is, and choosing to stand there because she can, and because it suits her. Section 6. The role of unconventionality in Mei Mei's identity. Here's something interesting about characters like Mei Mei that often gets overlooked in analysis. Their unconventionality is not a flaw the narrative wants us to fix. It is a feature the narrative wants us to examine. Anime, and storytelling in general, has a long tradition of characters who reject social norms. But usually those characters are positioned in one of two ways. Either they're villains who reject social norms because they're broken and need to be stopped, or they're heroes who reject social norms because the norms themselves were wrong and the character has the moral authority to transcend them. Mei Mei is neither. She is something more complicated and arguably more interesting. She is a character who rejects social norms simply because she finds them irrelevant to her, not because she has a grand ideology about freedom, not because she has been hurt by them, not because she is trying to make a point, just because she evaluated them, found them unconvincing, and moved on. And the story doesn't punish her for this. It doesn't reward her for it either, in the sense of holding her up as a moral example. It just presents her. Here she is. She is this way. What do you make of it? That's a rarer and braver authorial choice than it might seem at first, because it forces the audience to do the work. You can't sit back and receive a verdict. You have to make up your own mind about whether what you're seeing is admirable, concerning, enviable, or disturbing. And different people will arrive at different conclusions, which is exactly how the best characters operate. They don't resolve neatly, they stay open. Mei Mei's relationship with Ui is a perfect example of this. It is not presented as healthy, but it is also not presented as toxic in the dramatic, obvious way we usually see toxicity presented. It exists in a gray zone, and it exists there on purpose, because Mei Mei herself exists in gray zones. She is not a villain, she is not a hero. She is a person living by her own rules, in a world that is constantly trying to impose external ones, and her relationship with her brother is part of that. It is unusual, it is intense, it makes people uncomfortable. And she absolutely does not care that it makes people uncomfortable, because other people's comfort was never a variable in her calculations. Section 7. The power dynamic and what it reveals. Let's talk about power, specifically about the power imbalance in Mei Mei and Yui's relationship, because understanding it clearly is important. This relationship is not balanced, it is not meant to be balanced, and it will never become balanced because its structure depends on the imbalance. Ui's devotion flows entirely toward Mei Mei. She is the center, he is the orbiting body. The gravity in this system belongs to her completely, and Mei Mei accepts that structure not reluctantly, but naturally, as if it is simply the correct arrangement of things. Because from her perspective it is. She is older, more powerful, more experienced, more competent in the field, and frankly more dominant as a personality. Ui orbiting around her isn't something that happened by accident. It developed because in some deep structural sense it reflects reality. She is the more formidable of the two, and he recognizes that at a level that exceeds ordinary admiration and becomes something more like total submission. Now this is where I want to push back gently on the easy conclusion some people make, which is that Mei Mei is taking advantage of Ui or exploiting him. Taking advantage implies deception. It implies that Ui is being misled about what the relationship is. He is not being misled. He knows exactly what he is to Mei Mei, a devoted younger brother who is accepted and utilized, who is never rejected and never dismissed, but who will also never be elevated to equality. He understands his place in this dynamic, and he chooses it. Every single day he chooses it. That doesn't make the dynamic healthy in a conventional sense, but it makes it something more interesting than simple exploitation. It makes it a mutually constructed reality that both parties have opted into. Ui gets exactly what he wants, to be needed by Mei Mei, to matter to her, to be the person she calls on, to orbit around the person he has decided is the center of his world. Mei Mei gets exactly what she wants: reliable devotion, functional loyalty, emotional reinforcement, and total certainty in at least one relationship in a world full of uncertainty. Both of them are satisfied by this arrangement in their respective ways, and that's uncomfortable. It is genuinely uncomfortable. But the reason it's uncomfortable is not because it's predatory. It's because it's alien to the way most people are taught to think healthy relationships work. Most relationship advice tells you that both people should have equal power, equal voice, equal standing. That is the template for health. Mei Mei and Ui don't use that template. They have built something outside of it, and it works. Not for us, not by our standards, but for them. Section 8. The line she doesn't cross. Now we have to address the elephant in the room, because this analysis would not be honest if it didn't. There are details in the portrayal of Mei Mei and Ui that are designed to provoke discomfort on a specific level. The bed-sharing implication, the nature of some of their interactions, the general atmosphere of closeness that goes beyond what most people would consider normal sibling dynamics. These details exist, the writers put them there, and we have to ask why. I think the answer has two layers. The first layer is characterization. The details exist because they are the most effective way to communicate how thoroughly Mei Mei does not organize her life around conventional norms. The point is not that something inappropriate is happening. The point is that Mei Mei is the kind of person who could exist in that proximity without the discomfort or anxiety that most people would feel, because she does not operate from the same social programming. Most people in those situations would feel the weight of social taboo pressing on them. They would pull back, create distance, do the things society has trained them to do. Mei Mei does not feel that pressure in the same way. She has filtered it out, and the details in the story are communicating that aspect of her character. The second layer is tension. The story is deliberately creating an uncomfortable feeling in the audience to make sure you are paying attention. To make sure you do not treat Mei Mei and Ui as just another comedy sibling duo. It is using your discomfort as a narrative tool, pulling you in, making you engage, making you think. But, and this is critical, the story never confirms the darkest interpretation. It dances right up to the line, and then it stops. Every time, consistently, without exception. And I believe that is Gege Akutami, the author, trusting the audience, saying, "You are smart enough to understand that this is not the same as crossing that line. You are perceptive enough to sit with the tension without needing a resolution that confirms your worst fears. You can hold the complexity." The story presents Mei Mei as someone who goes further than normal, who stands closer to uncomfortable edges than normal, but who always knows where the actual boundary is, and it trusts you to see that. Section 9. Mei Mei in the broader context of JJK characters. Let me widen the lens for a moment, because I think it's useful to look at Mei Mei in the context of how Jujutsu Kaisen builds its characters generally. JJK is unusual as a shonen series in how seriously it treats moral ambiguity. Most shonen manga has a fairly clear center of moral gravity. The protagonists are good, the antagonists are bad, the people in the middle are waiting to be convinced to pick a side. The world has a moral architecture. Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't do that. In JJK, the moral architecture is shattered. The protagonists execute cursed spirits but sometimes question whether cursed spirits are deserving of that fate. The antagonists have coherent ideologies that make internal sense. The system the protagonists serve, the higher-ups, the Jujutsu world's governing structure, is itself corrupt, self-interested, and willing to sacrifice innocent people for its own preservation. In this world, good and bad are not reliable categories. What survives instead are individual people with individual codes, navigating a broken system according to to their own compass. Mei Mei is one of the purest expressions of that theme. She is not good by conventional measure. She is not evil by conventional measure. She is someone who has looked at the broken world around her, understood that external moral systems are not to be trusted, and built her own. She operates from that internal compass with total consistency and zero apology, and the story treats her with respect. Not admiration exactly, not condemnation either. Respect in the sense of presenting her seriously, engaging with her seriously, not reducing her to a joke or a cautionary tale. Her relationship with Ui is part of that portrait. It is one more way the story communicates. This person does not live by your rules. Understand her on her own terms, or you will not understand her at all. Section 10. What this means for how we watch her. So after all of this, after digging through the psychology, the power dynamics, the story structure, the authorial intent, what does it mean for how we actually watch Mei Mei? I think it means you have to stop trying to decide whether she is right or wrong and start asking what she is revealing. Every uncomfortable scene between Mei Mei and Ui is not there to make you feel bad. It's there to force a question. What exactly are the rules you're using to evaluate this relationship? Where did those rules come from? Are they intrinsic to being human, or are they learned? Are they about protecting people from harm, or are they about enforcing a particular template for how relationships should look? Mei Mei doesn't answer those questions, but she makes you ask them. And that is genuinely rare in a shonen anime. Most of the time, the characters are there to entertain you, maybe inspire you, maybe make you root for something. They're not there to make you interrogate your own moral assumptions. Mei Mei is there to do exactly that. Not in a preachy way, not in a way that announces itself. In the quiet, persistent, slightly uncomfortable way of a character who simply refuses to behave the way you expect and offers no apology for it. She teases Ui because he lets her, because she enjoys it, because it reinforces the dynamic she has chosen and the control she values, because in some way that is entirely her own, she appreciates what he gives her, even if she would never articulate it in those terms. She stands next to lines that most people won't stand near, not because she doesn't know they're there, but because she is certain she won't cross them. Her confidence in her own awareness is absolute. Her certainty in her own control is complete. And in a world where nothing is certain, where death is constant, where the system is corrupt, where allies can become enemies and enemies can become strangely understandable, that certainty, even directed inward, is its own kind of power. Section 11. The final reading. So here is the conclusion I want to leave you with. Mei Mei's relationship with Ui is not a love story. It is not a cautionary tale. It is not a running joke that the writers threw in for fan service. It is a portrait of a specific kind of person. A person who has looked at the world clearly and honestly, seen that external rules and social templates do not reliably produce good lives or good outcomes, and decided to build inward instead, to create her own framework, to operate from a position of self-knowledge so deep and control so complete that she can navigate territory that would destabilize most people, and emerge from it intact. That person chose to accept the extreme devotion of her younger brother, not because she doesn't understand how it looks, but because she has decided that looks are not her problem. That person teases him because she can, because she enjoys it, because it fits the dynamic she has built, because she is always in control. And that person knows, absolutely and without question, where the actual line is. She just doesn't feel obligated to stand far away from it simply because standing close makes other people nervous. Is that healthy? No, probably not, by most definitions of the word. Is it wrong? That's harder to answer cleanly, because the story has been careful not to make it simple. What it is, definitively, is fascinating, precise, intentional, and one of the most quietly interesting character dynamics in a series that is full of them. Mei Mei is not trying to be a hero. She is not trying to be a villain. She is not trying to be likable, relatable, or easy to understand. She is just being exactly who she is, without apology, without adjustment, and without asking for permission. And if that makes you uncomfortable, well, that's kind of the point. Outro. That's everything I've got for today. If you made it this far, honestly thank you. This was a long one, and I know not everyone has the patience for a 30-minute deep dive into an anime sibling dynamic, but this kind of character deserves time. The lazy reading is Mei Mei is weird and it's fan service. The real reading is that she is one of the most carefully constructed, morally ambiguous characters in modern shonen manga, someone who makes you uncomfortable on purpose for reasons that are worth sitting with. So, what did you think? Do you see Mei Mei's behavior as confidence and control, the expression of a fully self-determined person operating by her own rules? Or do you think it crosses a line that the story should have been clearer about drawing? There's no wrong answer here. This is genuinely a conversation I'd love to have. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what I missed. Tell me where you disagree. Tell me what aspect of this you want explored in a follow-up video. I read all of it. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. More analysis like this is coming. Deep dives into characters that don't get the serious treatment they deserve. From JJK, from other series, across the board. And until next time, take care of your siblings. Be kind to them. Support them. Be there for them. Just maybe, not quite like ooey ooey.